Ari, are you talking?
Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. Classic Zoom mistake. I'm still making it. Forgot to unmute myself. Great to see everybody here. I think we got a few folks still signing in, so we're going to let people join, and then we'll begin just in a moment. It's great to see so many of you already here, so many wonderful people. This is going to be an excellent conversation. So hang tight, give us another minute or two, and then we'll get started. All right, so let's begin. So welcome everybody. Again, thanks for coming tonight. We have a big project to do together. We have an urgent project to do together. We have to discuss the final work of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Jewish thinkers, philosophers, Torah scholars of the past 100 years, who was nifter very recently, and whose memory and loss is still very fresh in our minds and in our hearts, and whose Torah and ideas are as relevant as ever in today's climate. So, of course, talking about Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, and we're here to discuss him and his work, Morality. Rabbi Sacks, I'm not going to go through his whole biography. It's just amazing and breathtaking what he was able to accomplish. I'm sure many of you know, amazing Torah scholar, amazing author, publisher of many, many books, receiver of many, many awards, known worldwide. I think an unparalleled Jewish intellectual reach. I don't think there's any other scholar. Oh, what does that say? I'm getting a message. You can chat. I can't quite read it, but you can chat it to me. Unparalleled scholar. Is everything okay? Can you hear me okay? No? Barbara, I think it's maybe your, raise your hand if you can hear me. Alana, can you hear me? Okay, Barbara, it might be your computer. Sorry. Anyways, unparalleled intellectual reach to the spectrum of the Jewish people. I don't think there's a single rabbi who was able to speak to and engage in Torah with such a wide swath of Jewish people across the globe. And the reason why he was so successful and so heard is because he was brilliant, and he was funny, and he was worldly, and he was charming. But beyond that brilliance and that charisma that he had, there was something that he was able to do which was so critical to his voice, and I think why he was received the way he was. And I think it's so critical still today. And that's he was able to make Torah and Torah teachings relatable to the world, but more than just relatable, urgent. He was able to show the urgency of Torah, that the Torah was speaking profoundly to the moral crises and the issues that we're all thinking about in very urgent ways, not just as kind of like, oh, here's like a nice little drasha on whatever it is, the refugee crisis or nationalism or populism, but to take it to the next level and say the Torah has an urgent message that we need to hear about that. And that's something, at least personally, that always resonated with me about his Torah. It always felt so in the moment and so real and so important so urgent. And there's a quote that he writes that I just want to share with you. I think this is a great frame to the work we're going to do as a group. He writes, long ago, we were called on to show the world, we meaning the Jewish people, that religion and morality go hand in hand. Never was that more needed than in an age riven by religiously motivated violence in some countries and rampant secularity in others. To be a Jew is to be dedicated to the proposition that loving God means loving his image, humankind. There is no greater challenge, nor in the 21st century, is there a more urgent one. Just love it. That's Rabbi Sacks, like these big ideas about what Judaism is all about and speaking directly to the rampant secularism and the religiously motivated violence, on both sides of the spectrum, speaking profoundly to that reality and challenging us to do something about it. So that's where we're going to hang on. We're going to hang on the urgency. I don't think Rabbi Sacks would have wanted us to read his book and sit around and say, oh, what a beautiful book. He writes so beautifully. I think he would want us to read the book and really struggle with it and think, what does this mean? And how do I apply these ideas? And how am I a moral agent? He would really want us to feel an urgency around it. And that's what we're going to try to do as a group, to feel the moral urgency of this moment and of Rabbi Sacks and his teachings and how they can inspire us to moral action. And we have a great facilitator who's going to do that for us. That is our beloved friend and member, Alana Gleisher-Bloom. Alana has a long standing history and yichus in Skokie Valley, and is an amazing educator and thinker and philosopher, someone who I, over many years, have learned a lot from and am inspired by. She was a member of the inaugural cohort of the Melamdim Teacher Education at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Israel, in Jerusalem. And she taught Talmud and Tanakh at Rochelle Zell High School in Deerfield and at Heschel. And she's currently getting a doctorate in Jewish education, and she runs the Mensch Academy at Mishkan. And finally, she was awarded the Covenant Prize, the Pomegranate Prize from the Covenant Foundation. So someone with a lot of skills in facilitation and thinking, and Alana's done a lot of thought and preparation to get us ready for tonight. So I'm really excited to be in her hands as she guides us through this conversation about morality and how we should strive to be moral agents in a world that needs it so very much right now. So Alana, with that, I turn it over to you. And thank you for doing this for us, Alana.
Thank you. And I will say just that as I was getting ready, I came on here 5 minutes early. I've been doing Zoom school stuff for the past almost a year now. I feel very Zoom competent. And about 3 minutes ago, I logged myself off of my computer and I was just gone. So I am saying that just to make it clear that I thought I was a Zoom expert. And I don't know who is, no one. I want everyone to feel comfortable. Everyone makes mistakes on Zoom. And with that, one of the things that I like that helps me when I'm in, I don't know, even in just any class or discussion, it helps me to be able to see. Let's do this. I'll do this. I think it's nice to share a screen sometimes so that we can all look at the same thing together. Okay, so you all see that? Can you give me a thumbs up if you see that? Okay, I see a few thumbs up. Thank you. That's very helpful. Also, a trick of when you're sharing a screen is that you could click on the little, there's little things you could click on, and so you could still see a lot of faces. Anyway, so, oops. Oh my God. Yeah, I really shouldn't be bragging about any sort of tech prowess at this point. So here's where we are. Morality by Jonathan Sacks, a discussion group. Oh, come on. Okay, here's what we're going to be doing. We had an introduction by Ravari. Thank you. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we're going to talk to each other. And then we're going to be talking about two big topics tonight. One, religion and morality. And two, what I'm calling uniting across the divide. Bum, bum. We're all ready for this. So before we can begin, I don't know many of you. You all might not know each other. That can be really hard when you're talking about things together, when we don't know each other and we just see each other as faces on a screen. Can be very awkward. And sometimes it could be very easy to jump to conclusions about what people are saying and to, I don't know, just to guess or not fully understand each other. So I am really hoping that we can come together tonight, trying to embody, first of all, like the concept of dan the kafschut, of judging each other favorably of what we're going to say here. That's one. I didn't put that here, but I'm throwing that out there. And the other piece is I think that it can really be helpful in conversations when we're speaking about issues like religion and morality, to use I language, which means that I'm going to say, I think that blank is a moral issue, instead of saying like everyone thinks that this is important, because I don't want to speak for everyone. I'm going to speak for myself. And so you connected to that, you want to try to avoid generalizations such as, well, all those people think this and this. I can say, well, I really think this and this. I don't know if those people think this and this. So those are just really some important reminders of how we talk to each other as we get into these kind of complicated topics. Oh my God, come on, computer. Oh, I wrote, Rabbi introduces. He did that. Great. I'm going to stop the share for a second before I go on to that. Oh no, now it's disappeared forever. So the thing, I don't know how all of you felt when you were reading this book. I had a lot of feelings. I always have a lot of feelings. That's just something, you don't know me, you don't know that about me, but it's a thing. And I have some children who have a lot of feelings. It's just like a big feelings family. And something that helps me, especially when I'm reading philosophical texts or Torah of any kind, is to be able to pull from some of the feelings that I'm having and pull out larger questions that can help frame a bigger discussion around the big ideas. And so what like Ari and I were talking about this, and I think instead of talking about our feelings around different things in the book, which could be maybe a conversation for another time, I want us to talk about and respond to some of these bigger questions that came up. These were some of the questions that came up for me. Maybe there are other questions that came up for you, and maybe we can discuss those. But we are first going to talk about this question that I mentioned before about, and Ari mentioned it before too, about religion and morality. Ari brought in a quote from Rabbi Sachs about, hold on, I wrote down some notes about it, that religion and morality go hand in hand, and that is this important idea that Rabbi Sachs was bringing. So I'm going to share, just to give you a heads up, I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to pose a question and put a quote out there, and then I'm going to send you all into breakout rooms to discuss this question. Just giving you a heads up so you know what's coming. Here we go again. Okay. I'm going to need that validation once more. Give me a thumbs up if you see that screen. Thumbs up? Okay, great. So hard on Zoom. So this first question that I think is one of the core questions of this book and of Rabbi Sachs's work is, does practicing religion make you a moral person? So that question can be posed in a few different ways. I chose to write it this way. It's also like, do they have to go together? If you're not religious, are you not moral? There's a lot of different ways to think about this, but I put it like this intentionally. And I also wanted to share a quote from the book here. I'm wondering if anyone wants to unmute themselves and read out this quote, if you can see it. I never know what it looks like to anyone else.
I got it, Alana. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes?
A little staticky, but we got you.
Oh, if it's no good, then someone else should.
No, go.
Okay. To become moral, we have to make a commitment to some moral community and code. We have to make a choice to forego certain choices. We have to choose the right restraints. And having fallen in love with some ethical idea, we have to build a structure of behavior around it for the moment when love falters.
All right. So the quote that Ari read was actually, I think, a better quote than if I was gonna be subjective about it, that actually was talking about being religious and moral. But I think that this is something that he was talking about in the book about morality and community. Anyway, I'm putting that quote out there just to remind some of you what happened in this book and what he was talking about. But right now, I want you to take a few moments and think about how you might answer this question. You read Rabbi Sachs's book, but you also have your own life experiences as a human being, as someone who's a member of a synagogue, as someone who is Jewish. Does this, just what you've observed, what you've witnessed, what you've seen in your own life, does being a part of a religion make you a moral person? Or does it help you become a more moral person? While you think about this, I am going to assign you breakout rooms. Okay, so we're just going to have a few moments of quiet while I try to do this. Oh, no, I can't do it. Ari, can you make me the host? Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm going to send you out to these breakout rooms. I'm going to give you, you're going to be randomly assigned. And so you're going to be with 2 to 3 people per room. And you are going to discuss this question of religion and morality.
Alana, will the question be visible when we're in the breakout room?
I will put it into the chat so
Thank
that you can have it accessible. And I would like for everyone who's in that group to have give that person, it might only be 2 people, but make sure that each person has a chance to speak. And I'm going to give you probably like 8 minutes. We'll see if you need more time, you could chat that back to me. I'm going to give you 8 minutes. When you come back, you can decide in your group how you would like to share back out with the group some of your findings. Okay, I'm going to send you on your way now. Hold on. I'll send you on your way soon. Okay. You've been invited. Accept your invitation, please. Do you need me to get there?
Barbara, you're muted. Barbara's still here. Do you want to send Barbara to a group?
Yeah.
Or is this a group?
No, this is not a group.
Okay. Barbara, we're going to send you away.
Hold on. I'm trying to.
But you're going to have to unmute Barbara. And if you can't hear us, you're going to have to turn up the volume on your computer. Well, we can't hear you, but you're being dispatched.
It's not letting me. Because it looks like you should have a button somewhere that like is allowing you. I think I can send a thing.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you're unmuted
now. Okay.
There should be something that says you've been invited to a group. You want to click yes on that.
Oh, it just says join breakout room.
Yeah.
Click that. Yay, Zoom.
Oh, God. I don't know. I was like, I should give them each like a more strict protocol. But then I was like, I don't know if that's going to work with this crowd.
Yeah, we'll see. Can we drop into groups?
Yeah, I can. I don't. Well, you can now because you're the host. Do you see the breakout room things, or do I need to give you the hosting thing?
Oh yeah, I do.
Should I tell you who's in what?
Sorry.
Yeah, that was a room. That's a room just you. Like you ended up in a room just by yourself.
Special room for me. Not the first time.
Hold on, I'm gonna send them a question. That's the problem with. I don't know about this phrasing. I was being intentional about it, but now I'm not sure about it. Whatever.
I need to get Becca. Hold on. Another minute, actually. Yeah, look, we'll see what people do.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. This isn't for me, but some people might. Typically, I'm like Rav Ari.
Oh,
and some
sorry.
people- it's okay. It's not. It's just like some people might be
Yeah,
like
yeah.
offended
Sorry.
for
Yeah.
my sake.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Sorry.
It's a nice group. Do you know Leah Naaman?
Not really. But I think she
She's
lives.
cool. I'm glad she's on. She's like a very thoughtful, but very open-minded person. I'm curious what she says. And Matt Campter's on, which is cool. Curious. Yeah. Let me go check on Becca because I know she had at
Yeah.
8:30, and I might, if she's doing bedtime, I may need to tag out and
Yeah.
hold
Okay.
on.
I hope that wasn't too shocking that you all just got zapped back here. You're back. Hello. You're all back now, I think, I hope. I hope that was a fruitful conversation. I hope that you all had things to say to each other. And I'm wondering if anyone feels comfortable sharing with the bigger group stuff that came up for you in that conversation. You can just unmute yourself and talk if you feel
I
moved.
guess I'll speak for our group. I think that we pretty much were all in concurrence that people can be religious in the sense of practicing the rituals and stuff, but don't necessarily live a moral life. On the other hand, people can live a moral life, not necessarily be particularly religious, if religious at all. So I think that was pretty much. I think we all pretty much have that feeling. If anyone disagrees, speak up.
Our group landed in the same place. Just as we were finishing up, Shoshana was talking about kind of taking on different, like additional things in your observance. Keeping kosher or let's say we're using Judaism as an example, but keeping kosher or Shabbos or whatever, and that like the idea of like, and Shoshana, if you want to speak, please do, or if I'm not explaining this well, grab the mic. But she talked about like Nasev and Yishman, like we're gonna do these things, but we might not understand why. Maybe over time you will, but that you might just keep increasing this practice. There might not necessarily be like a moral morality thing that's tied into that. You might hope that there is, and that there's this idea that like, oh, over time maybe those things will all come together, but there's not like there's no rule that that's going to happen.
In my personal experience, religion and religiosity, I think, has definitely made me a better person. It's, caused me to give more in tzedakah than I probably would have given otherwise, and do things because there is this, mitzvah. There's like a obligation and regularity and structure and community and like teachers who inspire me to do stuff. So personally, absolutely. But I always think of this quote of Slavoj Žižek, who is this Slovenian contrarian, crazy philosopher. But it really resonates with me, where he talks about how normally we think of religion as the protector of morality. Like if it weren't for religion, we would all just be savages and kill each other, and religion kind of makes us moral. But he says it's the opposite. He says, you look at like the Twin Tower bombings, no atheist would fly a plane into 2 buildings and kill thousands of people. It takes religion to drive someone to do that. So he actually says it's the opposite. Religion is the force that makes people do some of the most amoral things, suicide bombings and, all kinds of horrible things. And that's always a powerful check. And I also think about, religions that have done bad things, like religious people and religious institutions, and that have really caused a lot of harm. So I kind of, on a personal level, I agree very deeply, and like that's how I live my life, and I'm very committed to it. But sometimes when I step back and think like on a more structural level, I wonder.
So our group also, we called it, we talked about how religion provides an overarching structure. That was mentioned. But we've talked about the word religion in terms of the question on the table. The word religion, of course, has different meanings. And as other groups have said, we have the same to report that religion for many, or for at least can mean adherence to the ritual, ritualistic adherence. And a person can lose sight of those moral underpinnings that are there, which could promote a more moral life, but they're not necessarily be seen. But right when we got zapped back into the main group, slightly jarring, but good to be back. So I think we're about to start talking about that a little more. That even in the case when a person is just, let's say, just, usually isn't just, but if you say it could be just ritualistic, even then, at least there's a sense of community. A main theme of the book, as you know, is the move, an unfortunate move from we to I. So even if a person is, in the Jewish sense, religious in the ritualistic sense, there's at least that benefit of feeling part of the group, the we, which would seem to, in most cases, promote some morality. To try to minimally define it.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
I'd like to add something that I thought was particularly important for people who are coming to religion rather late, and that is practicing a religion can provide a community of interest where you can find reinforcement for moral.
We lost you there.
Do I start again? That you can find a community of interest to reinforce ideas, introduce ideas to you, moral ideas, and most important, I think, provide language to articulate, to name those ideas. Because otherwise it's, it's vague feelings, and it's very hard to move from being motivated to actually actively doing something to promote your moral idea. If you have no language to describe it, to persuade others to enhance your actions, obviously actions speak louder than words sometimes, but that one thing that being part of a religious community and engaging in religious activity is learning that it has a name, that other people do this, it's part of life and it's okay. That's reinforcement.
I want to ask a follow-up question to what, because it sounds like I'm hearing that, yeah, like people can practice religion and not be moral, and people can be moral and not be religious. That all can happen. And I wonder if there is, I don't know, I'm wondering if, do you think it's really important that in your own, this is a personal question, do you think it's important in your own religious life, in your own Jewish life, that your Judaism helps make you into a more moral person? Like, is that a part of your Jewish experience? Yeah, Shoshana, share.
I would say for sure. I had said something to Barbara and Sarah about the fact that sometimes you start to do things just because to become more religious because you feel that it's right. You can't quite explain what motivated you, or maybe you can find an example of something that motivated you or inspired you. And sometimes you don't always understand things. So like when I started to keep kosher, the reason why I wanted to keep kosher, although I didn't totally understand what that meant, was that I thought that the signs on my cabinets would inspire me to remember that this was a mitzvah. And I think that, and in thinking about a mitzvah, then you think about what else does that mean? I think often practice becomes rote, and we don't always think about the mitzvah. But if we stop and we think about it, that I would say becomes a motivator or insight into helping you get beyond making it mundane and making it something more significant. So yeah, also, we live in plastic America. And it's very easy for us to be like everybody else. You know, the kids walk around and say, I'm just like everybody else. And they're just like me. So that becomes part of the reasoning about why they can pick and choose anyone they want to date or eventually marry. I'm strongly committed to continuity. And if the outcome is continuity, I'm satisfied with it. But in fact, we are different. And we are separate, and sometimes it's not easy to do that in America. If most of my friends don't keep kosher and I keep kosher, that becomes something that sets you apart and becomes a difficult thing or more of a challenge to deal with in our secular world.
So something else that I was thinking about while you were speaking, and also while I think Judith, is that your name?
Yes.
We're speaking about community, like how religious, it can make us into a community. And a few people were speaking about that, about us, you know, a religious community. There's like this idea of morality. And when, from what I was hearing in people speaking about their views on morality, it became like a personal thing. Well, hopefully I'll do this mitzvah and maybe it will make me personally connect to morality or something. It might connect in that way. I thought what was interesting about this book was the connection to thinking about, you know, taking that going from individualism to communal. And so I think the next step of this conversation is thinking about like, okay, so great, we should be moral. Perfect, amazing. Now the complicated piece is how can we be moral as a community? And what I think is really complicated about that, and I think Rabbi Sachs was saying this too, in a way, is what happens when you have a community that doesn't agree on what's moral and doesn't agree on which moral values should be emphasized. What I mean by that, I'm going to give the example of, I'm not even going to give an example of a Jewish community, but the example of America, United States of America. I think it's probably an objective thing to say, and not just my opinion, to say that we are in a divided time right now. We had, you know, there was a contentious election. And so how can we be in community? And I mean, like, community is larger, country, less divisive, etc. How can you be in a community or in a religious community when we can all agree that it's really important to be moral, but that doesn't mean that we all agree on which morals should be emphasized and that we even see the morality in each other. So I just want us to think about that for a second, and I'm gonna bring back up that awesome slideshow to show you the next like little thought experiment I want us to do. Hold on one second. Okay. My God. So I wrote here, can you imagine shared moral values across the divide? The quote here says, my firm belief is that the concept of covenant has the power to transform the world. It sees relationships in terms not of interests, but of moral commitment. So I see that, like, in order to see how all people might have similar moral or common moral commitments, in order to find, how do we find common moral commitments when we are in this divided moment? And so we're gonna, last time we did breakout rooms, now we're gonna do a fun thought experiment. So the thought experiment is, you're gonna take a moment, stay muted for this. You're gonna think back to November, beginning of November, 2020. There was an election coming up, and most likely you voted in it. And most likely, or I'm gonna make an assumption. I know that I had very strong feelings about who I voted for. You may also have had strong feelings about who you voted for. We're not going to talk about Trump versus Biden. Don't worry. We're not going there. We're just going to, we're just playing a little, we're just going down this path. So why did you, when you thought about who you were voting for, what was it that you cared about? Maybe there were a bunch of things. Just for a moment, think about like, what did you care about? What were like the morals that were behind your voting choice? Now, I'm gonna stop my share for a moment. I would appreciate it if you could put in the chat one word, a few words, but it's like one word answers about what you were thinking about when you were voting. I will speak for myself and say justice was a value to me. I will, and you could say, if you don't want to, that's okay. But just like if you have to pick a few words, it's obviously more nuanced than that, okay? And I don't want to like, okay. Now, thank you. I want you to think for a moment about someone who voted the opposite way that you did. Maybe you have someone, maybe it's a family member. I know that for me it is. And you imagine that person who maybe is, you might see them, or I'm going to use the I language. I have, I know that I've thought about people voting differently than me and been like, I can't, I can't see anything redeeming here. Like I have been. So, but if I had to think about like, what is going on? What are the morals? Is there a moral? Is there a value that the other voter is trying to uphold? What do you think it might be? If you can think of something, put it in the chat.
No. But we got to follow the rules. You can't explain why they're voting for the person, right? But rather, what's the good thing, the good moral thing that other person was coming from?
Oh.
It's hard. It's not easy. It's not. We're not saying, oh, the reason why they voted for that person is because they didn't understand this, or they were confused, or duped, or tricked, or whatever. No, we're saying, what's the positive thing that motivated that person to vote that way?
Okay.
Not easy.
So one of the things that was difficult for me in this book, there were a lot of things that were difficult for me in this book, and we're not going to go, I'm not going to hash that all out here. But I think that it's really difficult to talk about, even to talk about like moral responsibility in such a divisive time. Because, I mean, things are so high stakes right now. I feel like things are very high stakes right now. And it could be really difficult to, even have these conversations with anyone. And it can be difficult to actually think, maybe we all do have maybe we do have shared morality. Like maybe I wrote, I could speak for myself, that I wrote that I think that people who voted differently than I did might have been thinking about security. I think security is a value. It might not be at the top of my list of values. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I mean, personally, I want to be safe. So what does that mean? And how can we be in community together when we are emphasizing different values? Does it mean that like we just get smaller and smaller and divide into like smaller groups and smaller groups and smaller groups? Or is there a way, and the reason that like for there to be some sort of shared understanding of morals and be in community together as a country and in religious community. And I think that flows from this first question of like religion and morality to this idea of where does morality lie for individuals, and how do you then turn that into a communal morality? I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Yes.
You turn it into morality by finding that lowest common denominator, some minimal definition we can all agree on of morality. And that's what I think Rabbi Sachs trying to do in this book, where he points out these other trends of culture having shifted and being driven by, one, the state, the power, not statesmanship, but power grabs that go on in state, in the name of being statesman-like. And number two, the market, that everything becomes transactional, immediate, and presentational, he says. So the first thing to have a foothold on any morality is to have a minimal definition that we can all agree to. And he's showing that society is going towards victimhood and toward identity politics, all these buzzwords, but underlying it is at least some moral sense that people have gotten away from, and there's a discussion we can circle back to. That's almost like not saying anything, but he starts with that minimal definition, and it's tied. I'll say one more thing. It's tied into. You remember the book he talks about. It's not the first person to do this. Talks about right now we have a more of a shame-based culture, based on shame and then honor. And when you have shame, there is no tshuva. There's only appeasement, right? Where he's talking about we have to get back to, and we've had a departure since the 60s or whatever. We've had a departure from the higher level, which is guilt-based, right? Guilt. It's not that you're ashamed and you're irredeemably stained. You must resign. You have many stories where people have been forced to resign for just saying the wrong thing that you can't take it back. So he's trying to appeal to a higher sense, and that at least is a foothold to have a conversation in this divisive time. That it may be just minimal, but I to answer the question or attempt to answer, he's talking about that there can be morality. We just have to lay bare some of the minimal definitions of that. Whereas in the culture, there's been moving away from that, just to have a dialogue to talk about that there is some to appeal to a people's higher sense. I'm not sure if it makes any sense, but some of the things he fleshes out in the book, we have to move away from this. He calls out the market and the state and the shame-based culture, and he's inviting a discussion to move back to more of the, he doesn't say it, he's so careful not to use Hebrew language or Torah language, but the Tzelem Elohim and the idea of guilt and not shame. And then there can be some discussion of morality even across the divide by just talking about these terms. There's an uplifting value of talking in these terms.
I'd like to suggest that a place to begin could be to distinguish the different meanings that the same words or the same idea people on opposite sides of the fence. And maybe picking up on Sachs's distinction between shame culture and guilt culture. The shame culture implying that the person who sins or transgresses is a pariah who has to be shunned. And in some cultures, they commit suicide because there's no redemption. Or is the person simply in error and a teshuva ready example of someone who can correct himself and get himself back on the right path and feel guilty about it? But, you know, there are ways of dealing with that guilt. And even not just paying back, but restoring himself to the extent of erasing the bad deed from his past. And I think in terms of the political analogy of my colleague Sam Fleischaker's book on distributive justice, a history of distributive justice, that is, you know, whether you share the goods from an entire community with the people at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder or not. And he was able to show how the idea that the poor deserve what they got, and if we give them free handouts, we're not helping them. We're keeping them at this base level of not being good. And that traces back to differences in different religious outlooks within Christianity, no less. So I think first we have to understand that we're using the same language to talk about different things, then talk about the different things and see if there's some way to negotiate a middle ground. If people are not ready for the extreme views at either end, how can we come to a common solution to deal with people who are transgressing in some fashion or another? That doesn't involve, what do they call it in Asian cultures when, you know, you murder someone because they've done an irreparable transgression for the family, shamed the family.
Honor killing.
I'm just going to add, I heard a really brilliant presentation by one of my colleagues at Northwestern describing how there's an ongoing effort to create a body of international law. People are hammering out, trying to deal with different attitudes toward murder, you know, and all these details about when murder is acceptable. That's so different in different cultures, and find some kind of common ground that people can agree on. People are trying to do this. And Sachs himself, in a previous book on Not in God's Name, about violence, basically is demanding, you know, requesting that the leaders of the Abrahamic faiths get together and hammer out craft a theology of nonviolence. I mean, what a challenge. Haven't heard people scrambling to take that up, but if the leaders of Islam and say Catholicism and Judaism, even at the local level, got together regularly to see what a theology of nonviolence would entail and all the complications, it would be a very interesting conversation that might trickle up to the top.
Thank you. I think we have to end soon, but I wanted to say lastly that, like, if you scroll through the chat and see some of these just written out values, I think it's interesting because, like, I do think it's interesting that I think that ultimately a lot of people, divided people, probably have similar values. And I think what we can't agree on is how to actually articulate those and make them into action, and like policy differences. But policy differences are big deals. Like it is a big deal. And so I do want to, I don't want it to seem like I live in some fantasy land. I think it's really important to be able to recognize morality in each other and find moral common ground. I think that is important. I also think that like policy is important and like creating like all of this is really important. And I'm not sure where to go from here, but I do think that it really is an important exercise for myself and for anyone to be able to find a moral common ground with other people. There's a lot of other stuff here in this book. And I don't know.
I just real quick, I was thinking that the morals, I agree that they all seem the same. If you didn't know that, you said, hey, put the things that you were on your side versus the other side, and we don't know what each person. But I wonder if the thing that's different is what are people afraid of, and that doesn't have to be. We don't have time to talk about that, but
Yeah.
that, like maybe we all have very similar morals, but that our fears or what can get kind of poked and prodded as like, hey, these are the things that are very scary out there, that's what starts driving other things.
I think that it's sort of like in order to have a conversation or get anywhere, you need to start like so far back. And so I think Matt was saying it as like the lowest common denominator. I wouldn't use that language because I want to see it as something like looking at a kernel of truth, as opposed to, like find that like little piece of humanity in each other, and then try to build from there to build relationships so that maybe you can actually speak to each other and maybe you can understand what the other is worried about. I also do think that there has been a lot of work in the past few years of people trying to understand each other, and I feel a little, I mean, I don't know that it's been so successful. And I think it's still an important work to be done. I don't know if Rav Ari is here. He might have had to run. I'm not sure. But I also know that people might have other commitments to go. So I don't know if you want to close it out.
Sorry, there was a sad child I had to tend to. So I missed the last 5 minutes. But look, these conversations are so important. They're really hard to have. It's actually really hard to get into these topics in a way that is authentic and real to ourselves, and also is really authentically open to people who may have different feelings and different moral convictions than us. And it's so important we try to do that work, as I think to fulfill, a lot of what you've laid out and what Rabbi Sachs Zal lays out, is creating societies of covenant, in a sense that we have a shared destiny, we have a shared purpose, we have something in common. We're not just individuals scrapping for our, own best interests and competing in a survival of the fittest arena. So it's really so critical. And I think tonight was a great start. And I missed the last 5 minutes, but I hope we plan on having 2. And I hope we can have another one to both continue the personal work and also continue unpacking the thought of Rabbi Sachs to how to better do that and give us tools to do that, because it's what we have to be doing right now. I think this is our work as a Jewish people, as an American people, as a global people. So thank you, Alana, for starting us off. And was there a consensus we should have number 2 when we scheduled it?
I didn't even ask. We were just concluding on these ideas.
Let's do it. Let's schedule it. If people have had enough of the moral conversation, well, I'm going to push you. It's never enough. Come back.
Well, I mean, Sarah had pointed out that maybe it's not about, because you can look through this and see where people have agreements on morals. It's like, we don't know who's saying what. You could agree on these different morals, but what do we fear? Like, what are the things we actually fear here that can be maybe a next step here? And I was saying that I think if you pull back, like in order to have a conversation, you need to pull back and find the moral shared truth. But then I think there does have to be a next step of like, how do you actually have the harder conversation? We're now talking about having a hard conversation about how you can start it, but we haven't actually had a hard conversation. That's what I think.
Yeah. So next time, a harder conversation. If that doesn't bring you back, right. I don't know what will.
Thanks, everyone.
So thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Alana. And Yashikach.
Thank you, Yashikach.
Good night.